Have you ever pondered about the sheer power of massive ships that travel across the ocean? The thousands of tons of steel slicing through the water, carrying cargo, passengers, and sometimes even dreams. But what happens when things go terribly wrong? When the captains make a critical mistake, or when Mother Nature decides to unleash chaos? From massive container ships tangling like heavyweight fighters to luxurious cruise liners crashing into chaos, these are the stories that leave even seasoned sailors speechless. So, join us as we unravel 20 of the biggest ship collisions and mistakes caught on camera. Number 20. Norwegian Epic Crash. On Valentine's Day in the year 2019, the Norwegian Epic, a massive cruise ship, embarked on what was meant to be a dreamy 7-day adventure through the sparkling waters of the Eastern Caribbean. Passengers were eagerly looking forward to their next stop at the picturesque Virgin Islands when the journey took an unexpected turn. Midway through the voyage, the captain announced mechanical problems that required an unscheduled detour to San Juan, Puerto Rico, to address the issue. As the Epic approached the harbor in San Juan, a local pilot came aboard to guide the massive vessel safely to dock. With the assistance of several tugboats, the maneuver seemed routine at first. However, the situation took a sharp twist when sudden gusts of wind began to push the ship dangerously close to the pier. The winds, coupled with the ship's size, created an unexpected challenge. The ship's mooring points, structures designed to secure such large vessels in place, bore the brunt of the Epic's immense weight as it was forced against them. Unfortunately, the pressure proved too much for these anchoring platforms. They gave way and sank to the seabed. While the pier sustained damage and several mooring points were destroyed, the Epic itself experienced only minor harm. Miraculously, no passengers or crew were injured during the crash. But while the Epic's ordeal ended with minimal damage, 3 years later, in the fog-choked waters of Bangkok, another maritime collision would prove far more catastrophic. Number 19. Bangkok Tugboat Collision. On October 11th, 2022, a thick blanket of fog rolled over the bustling Bangkok approach channel, reducing visibility to almost nothing. For large ships navigating these waters, it was like sailing blindfolded. Among the vessels braving these conditions that day was the Vita Star, a Liberian-registered container ship carrying a towering load of cargo. At the same time, a hard-working tugboat was towing 4 massive barges filled with heavy coiled metal sheets toward Bangkok's port. Neither vessel could spot the other through the impenetrable mist, and by the time they realized what was happening, it was too late to avoid disaster. The Vita Star collided forcefully with one of the barges in the tow, resulting in a dramatic crash. The barge, named Mahana Cone 2, bore the brunt of the impact. It suffered catastrophic damage, quickly taking on water and sinking, dragging its precious cargo of coiled metal to the bottom of the channel. Miraculously, no one was injured in the accident, which could have turned deadly in an instant. Authorities acted swiftly to cordon off the area, warning other vessels to steer clear until salvage crews could remove the wreck. But while the Vita Star's collision brought cargo to the depths, another maritime disaster years earlier off Georgia's coast would see an entire ship's fate hanging in the balance. Number 18. The Golden Ray Collision. On September 8, 2019, a South Korean cargo vessel named the Golden Ray, loaded with 4,000 cars destined for the Middle East, experienced a heavy list off the coast of Georgia. As the ship tilted dangerously, it eventually overturned right before the eyes of onlookers. Miraculously, just in the nick of time, the crew was rescued by the U.S. Coast Guard. This dramatic incident highlighted the perilous nature of transporting such a large and heavy load across the sea, especially under rough conditions. The Golden Ray was a massive roll-on, roll-off ship stretching over 650 feet long and carrying a load of luxury and high-end vehicles. As the ship began to list heavily, the crew of 24 was trapped on board for hours. The US Coast Guard worked tirelessly to airlift the crew to safety, a process that took several hours due to the challenging weather and sea conditions. This incident underscored the significant risks associated with transporting such large cargo ships, especially in the narrow, tricky channels of the Georgia coast where the Golden Ray was trying to navigate. After this dramatic maritime accident in Georgia, tensions flare in the Southern Ocean as anti-whaling activists face off. Number 17. Whale War Clash. In a dramatic showdown, a futuristic anti-whaling powerboat known as the Adi Gil was sliced in two by a Japanese whaling vessel, the Shonan Maru No. 2. The incident, which occurred as activists from the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society attempted to disrupt the annual whale hunt, resulted in catastrophic damage to the Adi Gil, despite its crew's efforts to defend themselves by hurling stink bombs. The collision, which was widely viewed as unprovoked, drew significant international attention and marked the beginning of what many called a real whale war. Carefully, the crew of the Adi Gil was rescued by the nearby Bob Barker ship, which was part of Sea Shepherd's fleet. This escalation in hostilities highlighted the deepening tensions between anti-whaling activists and the Japanese whaling fleet. It wasn't just about confrontation on the high seas. Both sides began accusing each other of dangerous and aggressive behavior. The Sea Shepherd team, using small, fast boats equipped with inflatable rams and sonic devices, aimed to intervene directly in the whaling operations, often putting themselves in harm's way. But just as one collision at sea ignited a global conflict over conservation, another on the shores of Baltimore would expose alarming vulnerabilities in modern maritime safety. Number 16. Baltimore Bridge Crash. In 2024, the city of Baltimore, Maryland, witnessed a devastating tragedy when the cargo ship Dolly collided with a major bridge, causing extensive destruction and claiming several lives. The event sent shockwaves through the community, leaving residents heartbroken and grappling with difficult questions about how such a catastrophic accident could occur in an era of advanced technology and stringent regulations. The chain of events leading to the crash was both alarming and complex. The Dolly had been battling persistent mechanical issues.
3 weeks after the collapse of the Key Bridge, work continues here to clear the channel.
Particularly recurring power outages. In the crucial moments before the collision, the ship experienced a critical blackout, leaving the crew with minimal control over the massive vessel as it barreled toward the bridge. Weighing thousands of tons, the Dolly became an unstoppable force, its momentum underscoring the dire consequences of even a momentary systems failure on such a scale. Adding to the dire situation was the fact that the ship was under the guidance of a relatively inexperienced navigator. Although a seasoned pilot was supervising the overwhelming circumstances, communication breakdowns, both within the crew and between the ship and harbor authorities, further compounded the chaos. When Dolly struck the bridge, the impact was catastrophic. The bridge's structural integrity was compromised, leading to immediate closure and causing significant disruption to both road and marine traffic. But as shocking as the tragedy in Baltimore was, it wasn't an isolated incident. Halfway across the world. Number 15. Cargo ship collision. This dramatic incident occurred at a bustling port in Pakistan, where a large cargo ship was maneuvering into the dock. Unfortunately, the ship approached the berth much faster than it should have, leading to a miscalculated entry. As a result, it collided with another vessel that was already securely moored in the harbor. The impact wasn't just a minor scrape. It was significant enough to send shockwaves across the port. Several cargo containers, carefully stacked on the moving ship, toppled over and plunged straight into the water. Reports indicate that at least 21 containers were lost to the sea. These containers weren't just carrying run-of-the-mill goods, they held valuable cargo, including automobiles and other high-value freight, adding up to a substantial financial loss. The collision caused visible damage to both ships, and the port authorities were forced to shut down operations temporarily. This was necessary to assess the full extent of the damage, recover the fallen containers, and launch an investigation to determine exactly what went wrong. Such collisions aren't uncommon in busy ports, but they highlight the risks of navigating large vessels in confined spaces. But while the port of Pakistan grappled with its own chaos, halfway across the world in Istanbul, a ship's uncontrollable course would leave a mark not just on the waters, but on centuries of history. Number 14. Vita Spirit. In Istanbul, there was a historic mansion perched right on the coast of a busy waterway, frequently traveled by ships. In 2028, one of these ships, the bulk carrier Vita Spirit, experienced a significant issue. A rudder became stuck. Without a working rudder, ships tend to follow a single, uncontrollable path, regardless of the captain's intentions. Fortunately, no one was inside the mansion at the time of the crash, so no one was hurt. However, the mansion suffered substantial damage. This incident highlighted the risks that large vessels pose when they collide with structures not built to withstand such impacts. The mansion, originally owned by a physician who served in the Ottoman palace, dated back to the 18th century and was made from materials that were not particularly strong. It was primarily constructed from wood and plaster, which made it more vulnerable to damage from the impact of the collision. The crash occurred when the ship's rudder malfunctioned while navigating through the narrow and busy Bosphorus Strait, making it difficult to avoid obstacles. Just a decade after the damage caused by the Vita Spirit's mishap in Istanbul, another accident occurred, this time involving a super yacht. Number 13. The super yacht Ecstasy. The super yacht Ecstasy, measuring about 282 feet in length, was involved in a significant accident in 2019 as it attempted to enter the Simpson Bay Lagoon in St. Martin. Strong winds and fast currents caused the yacht to lose control, resulting in a collision with the control booth of a bridge.
So we have no bridge anymore?
Oh no, that's gonna stay. No bridge or breaking for us.
But he's down and he's ran downstairs.
Remarkably, the bridge keeper managed to leap out of the booth just in time before impact. Despite this close call, there were no injuries reported from the incident. Ecstasy is renowned for its luxurious features and advanced technology. It is equipped with an upgraded stabilizer system designed to enhance stability at sea, ensuring a smoother ride even in rough conditions. The yacht also boasts a top-of-the-line communications suite for long-range connectivity, allowing its guests to stay connected no matter where they are in the world. The Ecstasy features a state-of-the-art entertainment system, a heli-deck for helicopter landings, and multiple decks offering stunning panoramic views. This super yacht has been the choice of numerous high-profile guests, including celebrities and royalty, making the accident a surprising setback for such a prestigious vessel. Despite Ecstasy's cutting-edge technology and reputation for opulence, its harrowing incident pales in comparison to the catastrophic chaos that unfolded aboard another ill-fated vessel. Number 12. MTS Oceanos. The cruise ship MTS Oceanos was a French-built vessel that had a long career before its tragic final journey in 1991. With Captain Janis Avranas at the helm, who had been a seaman for 30 years, many passengers felt reassured, believing that with such a veteran in charge, things couldn't go too wrong. However, their confidence would soon be put to the test. The Oceanos ran into a severe storm that night, causing conditions on board to deteriorate rapidly. As the storm intensified, waves, some freakishly large, slammed into the ship, and soon the Oceanos began to take on water. Power was lost, and the engine room quickly flooded, leaving the ship adrift and at the mercy of the waves. Alarmingly, there was no announcement or alarm to inform passengers of the dire situation. It wasn't until passengers began to realize something was wrong that they went to the bridge to find it empty. A shocking and terrifying realization. One of the entertainers on board bravely used the ship's radio to broadcast a distress call, reaching out for help. Rescue helicopters and lifeboats were dispatched, and luckily, everyone was eventually saved. But just as one crisis ended in dramatic fashion, another would strike a decade later, testing the safety of modern cruise ships in ways no one could have predicted. Number 11. Carnival Splendor. The Carnival Splendor was a cruise ship operated by Carnival Cruise Line that faced a significant crisis on November 8, 2010. On the second day of a journey from Long Beach to the Mexican Riviera, the ship encountered a major problem. A catastrophic failure occurred when one of its diesel generators caught fire in the engine room, a particularly problematic place for a fire to start.
We have a smoke situation, lots of smoke in one of our engine control areas.
The blaze quickly spread to the ship's electrical cables, causing a complete power outage across the entire vessel. Although the fire was critically extinguished, and fortunately, no passengers or crew members were injured, the damage was extensive. With 4,500 people on board, the Carnival Splendor was stranded without electricity. Unable to restore power to the engines, the ship was towed by a tugboat back to California. Due to the lack of power for essential systems, including air conditioning and refrigeration, the passengers faced significant challenges. The United States Navy stepped in by landing helicopters on the ship and distributing rations to the stranded passengers. To compensate for the inconvenience, all passengers received a full refund for their tickets and travel expenses. In addition, Carnival offered each passenger a voucher for a future free cruise. As one ship battles a crippling crisis on the high seas, another is at the mercy of an unforgiving environment. Number 10. The Marmara Sea Crash. On October 24, 2021, when two cargo ships collided in the Marmara Sea, many were left wondering what had gone wrong. The Beni Tamu, a massive 1,000-foot vessel, was transporting cast iron ore from Ukraine to China. Meanwhile, a slightly smaller ship, the BC Vanessa, was carrying wheat from Egypt to Bulgaria. Both ships were en route to an anchorage zone in the Marmara Sea, where they would then proceed through the Dardanelles Strait into the Aegean Sea. Around 6 a.m. local time, thick fog rolled over the area, drastically reducing visibility. In these reduced conditions, the BC Vanessa collided with the Beni Tamu, striking it on the side and causing significant damage to its hull, allowing water to seep in. The BC Vanessa suffered severe damage to its bow, but despite the impact, it managed to sail to an anchorage spot in eastern Turkey. The real challenge was for the Beni Tamu and its crew. Thankfully, there were tugboats and salvage vessels nearby to assist.
Oraya kaçmayın be esas.
No one was hurt during the crash, and after the incident, both ships were towed to a salvage yard in Turkey, where the damaged vessels were inspected and repaired. While the collision in the Marmara Sea was a wake-up call for maritime safety, the next incident took place in a very different setting. Number 9. The Hornblower. This is a dramatic scene of a boat that got completely out of control. In this case, it was due to a simple mechanical malfunction, specifically a throttle that became locked in the forward position. Those on board felt uneasy, with one witness describing the situation as coming in a little hot. However, it wasn't until they made an impact on the San Diego pier that the danger became very real. The hull of the ship was seriously damaged, and so was the pier's walkway. Miraculously, no one died. Only 7 passengers suffered minor injuries, with 3 of them needing hospital treatment. This outcome is particularly surprising considering the circumstances. If this had been a regular occurrence, a cruise ship hitting a pier at speed would have been a disaster. It's almost unbelievable that no one was seriously hurt. Remarkably, the captain did sound the horn before the crash, which likely gave people just enough warning to brace themselves for impact. Interestingly, the boat in question was the Hornblower, a popular party boat used for various events and celebrations. The Hornblower's reputation was on the line after this incident, as this was not the first time it had experienced mechanical issues. Interestingly, what seemed like a simple mechanical failure on the water soon pales in comparison to the intense confrontations that occur when ships are deliberately driven into conflict. Number 8. The Bob Barker Confrontation. The Sea Shepherd Conservation Society's fleet, armed with 3 ships, a helicopter, and 6 inflatable boats, confronted Japan's whaling armada in the Southern Ocean. The confrontation reached a critical point when the Bob Barker, a Sea Shepherd vessel, collided with the Japanese harpoon ship Yushin Maru No. 2. This incident not only escalated tensions, but also highlighted the ongoing conflict between conservationists and whaling operations. For months, the Sea Shepherd fleet had been monitoring the Japanese whalers, tracking their movements and thwarting their attempts to reach the prime hunting grounds in Antarctica. The collision on that day marked a significant escalation, as the Bob Barker attempted to obstruct the Yushin Maru No. 2 progress by positioning itself in its path. This Southern Ocean conflict has long been a battleground for these opposing interests, with both sides using a range of tactics to assert their positions. This incident was part of Sea Shepherd's broader strategy to use non-violent direct action to disrupt whaling activities and raise awareness of the environmental and ethical concerns surrounding commercial whaling. The Sea Shepherd fleet often finds itself in intense encounters with Japanese whaling vessels, given that the organization's founder, Captain Paul Watson,
especially when we did a television show called Whale Wars, where we went down to the Southern Ocean and we confronted the Japanese whaling fleet,
is known for his confrontational approach. But while battles raged on the high seas against whaling fleets, another maritime catastrophe unfolded on New Zealand's shores. Number 7. New Zealand Disaster. In 2012, the Rainer cargo ship became the scene of what is often remembered as New Zealand's worst environmental disaster. The ship ran aground near Tauranga and 3 months later finally broke in 2 and sank. Salvage crews worked around the clock to remove hundreds of containers and much of the oil on board. But despite their efforts, a significant amount of oil still leaked into the ocean. The spill released approximately 350 tons of heavy fuel oil and thousands of tons of bunker fuel, creating an enormous slick that stretched over 20 kilometers. The disaster affected more than 4,000 square kilometers of coastline, coating beaches and rocky shores with oil. The impact on marine life was severe, with researchers estimating that up to 88% of the local seabird population was affected by the spill. Terns, shearwaters, and penguins were among the species most impacted, with thousands found dead or severely injured. In response, hundreds of volunteers quickly mobilized to help,
Operations as the fact that we're self-sufficient so we can come here.
scouring the shores to rescue seabirds, many of which were covered in oil and struggling to survive. These volunteers played a crucial role in caring for thousands of affected birds, cleaning their feathers and helping them recover.
The first release.
But just as New Zealand's shores began to heal from one maritime disaster, thousands of miles away, the tranquil waters of Honduras bore witness to a ship collision that left everyone on the dock frozen in disbelief. Number 6. Deviating from its course. For the MSC Harmonia, docking in Honduras should have been just another routine stop during its cruise journey. The waters were calm, the weather was favorable, and everything seemed perfectly on schedule. Passengers were likely preparing to disembark and explore the beautiful port town of Roatan. However, what began as a smooth sailing experience quickly turned into a chaotic scene that no one could have predicted. As the massive ship approached the dock, something alarming happened. It didn't slow down. Instead of easing into a gentle stop, the Harmonia kept moving at an unusual pace, heading straight for the pier. And then, to everyone's shock, it crashed right into the dock, damaging both the pier and the ship itself. In a desperate attempt to avert the disaster, some crew members tried to drop the anchors, hoping it would act as an emergency brake. Unfortunately, by then, the ship's momentum was too strong. The anchors were deployed too late, and they couldn't stop the Harmonia from slamming into the pier. The crash caused significant structural damage to the pier, rendering it temporarily unusable for other ships. Now it's time for today's subscriber pick. It was a calm, faithful evening when the passengers aboard the massive cruise ship were looking forward to a 5-day journey of relaxation and adventure. The sun was setting over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the deck as families enjoyed the last of their dinner under the stars. But then, without warning, disaster struck. A flicker of flame appeared in the engine room, and within moments, the fire spread, devouring everything in its path. Panicked cries filled the air as passengers and crew raced to the lifeboats, their footsteps pounding on the deck. As the fire raged, the air turned thick with smoke. The heat was unbearable, and the passengers were quickly trapped on the deck, unable to breathe. The Coast Guard's response seemed agonizingly slow, leaving everyone feeling helpless and scared. The ship began to list, and it was clear they were running out of time. Faced with a terrible choice, stay and risk being consumed by flames or leap into the choppy, dark waters below, the crew and passengers began to panic. One by one, terrified families climbed over the railings and jumped into the waves. The water was cold and the waves were rough, making it hard to stay afloat. But they had no choice. As the ship burned behind them, they clung to life vests and debris, praying for rescue. Hours passed, and just as hope seemed lost, the Coast Guard arrived in a flurry of activity. The familiar wail of sirens cut through the chaos, signaling the arrival of boats racing to their aid. Miraculously, most of the passengers and crew were rescued, some with minor injuries, others exhausted but alive. But little did anyone know, this harrowing night was only a precursor to another shocking incident. Number 5. Cruise ship collision. In 2019, Carnival Cruise Line faced one of its most serious incidents, although fortunately, it was on a smaller scale. The incident involved the Carnival Glory, a ship attempting to dock between two other vessels, including the already docked Carnival Legend. This maneuver was risky because the Legend could not move away and avoid a collision if something went wrong. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. Initially, it seemed that the Glory might successfully maneuver between the two ships without incident. However, as it was attempting to dock, the back of the Glory struck the front end of the legend. The footage from the incident vividly captured the surreal moment when the back of the Glory was punctured and torn, illustrating the speed and force of the impact. Despite the damage, there were only minor injuries, with a few crew members and passengers suffering cuts and bruises. Notably, passengers reported that they didn't even feel the crash, which underscores how unexpectedly and quickly the impact occurred. This incident highlighted the complexities of maneuvering such large cruise ships and the inherent risks involved when docking in close quarters. But if you thought the Carnival Glory's docking mishap was intense, this next one will leave you utterly speechless. Number 4. Ship versus crane. The Milano Bridge was a massive container vessel that found itself in a dramatic and disastrous situation. It was being carefully maneuvered toward the dock with the help of tugboats, a standard practice to ensure precision for such large ships. However, things took a chaotic turn when, for reasons not entirely clear, the Milano Bridge began moving much faster than it should have. In a desperate attempt to avoid disaster, the crew tried to steer the ship away from the dock at the last moment, but the sheer size and momentum of the vessel made it impossible to prevent what happened next. The ship barreled straight into one of the massive dockside cranes, causing a jaw-dropping scene of destruction. The impact was so forceful that the crane collapsed spectacularly, crashing down onto the ship itself. Despite the chaos, the Milano Bridge didn't stop there. It continued forward, eventually crashing into another dock, adding even more damage to the growing list of destruction. Miraculously, no lives were lost in the incident. However, a crane operator inside the fallen structure sustained injuries, including a broken ankle, underscoring just how lucky it was that the consequences weren't more severe. This incident highlights the immense risks involved in handling such enormous ships. The chaos of the Milano Bridge might have showcased the dangers of navigating massive ships. Another maritime giant would face a far more catastrophic fate, one that still echoes through history. Number 3. Titanic. The Titanic was not just the largest ship in the world when it was completed, it was a symbol of technological advancement and luxury. When it was launched in 1912, it was a marvel of engineering, 462 feet long, weighing over 46,000 tons. To operate its massive boilers, the ship needed 600 tons of coal each day. Remarkably, it took a crew of 176 workers.
Enough coal to safely make it to New York and back again with more to spare. So ample storage was provided for tons of the stuff.
To shovel coal into the furnaces, tirelessly feeding the fireboxes with fuel to keep the ship moving. On the tragic night of April 15, 1912, the Titanic struck an iceberg at 20 minutes to noon, just 4 days into its maiden voyage from Southampton to New York. Over the next 2 hours, the ship slowly took on water, its lifeboats being launched in near darkness and chaos. The freezing temperatures of the North Atlantic posed another danger. Many passengers and crew members succumbed to hypothermia while waiting for help. Of the 2,224 people on board, only 710 survived the sinking. Interestingly, a lifeboat drill had been scheduled for that afternoon, but it was cancelled by the captain, an ironic twist given that it could have saved many lives. But as history would repeat itself a century later, another disaster would prove that even with modern technology, the gravest threats to maritime safety often come not from the sea. Number 2. Costa Concordia. On January 13, 2012, the Italian cruise ship Costa Concordia, during a planned 7-day cruise, veered off course unexpectedly and sailed dangerously close to the island of Giglio. This decision turned out to be a fatal mistake. The ship struck an underwater rock, causing it to capsize and partially sink right off the coast. An intense 6-hour rescue operation followed, bringing nearly everyone safely ashore. But tragically, 33 lives were lost in this catastrophic incident. People ask about how a tragic failure occurs despite the advanced technology available on modern cruise ships, and an investigation revealed that human error was largely to blame, specifically pointing to the crew's negligence, with the ship's captain, Francesco Schettino, being held primarily responsible for steering off course. Schettino also made the disastrous decision to abandon the ship
before, but there was another one.
Yeah.
And more than a Coast Guard captain, he's a lawyer.
at the first sign of danger, leaving many passengers and crew behind. As a result, he was later found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 16 years in prison. Interestingly, Costa Cruises and its parent company, Carnival, faced no criminal charges for the incident. The Costa Concordia was declared a constructive total loss by the cruise line's insurance company. To salvage the ship, flotation tanks were welded to its sides to help refloat it. But before the tragic sinking of the Costa Concordia, this other deadly maritime disaster struck in 1934, leaving passengers with no escape route. Number 1. SS Morrow Castle Disaster. On the night of September 5th, 1934,
See, the world's greatest horror of horrors. The luxurious ward liner Morrow Castle is being raked by flames.
things took a tragic turn when the ship caught fire and ran aground while traveling from Cuba to New York. A devastating 137 passengers and crew members perished in this disaster. The day before the fateful event, the ship's captain suddenly and unexpectedly died from unrelated causes, leading some to speculate about the vessel's mysterious curse. Around 10 minutes to 2 a.m., a fire was discovered in the storage locker, and it quickly spread, consuming the entire ship. For some reason, the Coast Guard's response was slow, leaving passengers and crew trapped in a dire situation where the deck became unbearably hot and smoke made breathing almost impossible. They were faced with a dreadful choice: endure the intense heat and smoke, or leap overboard into choppy waters. Swimming was nearly impossible due to the rough sea conditions. Of the 12 lifeboats on board, only 6 were successfully launched. It remains unclear why the other lifeboats were not deployed, even though there was sufficient room for everyone. Eventually, rescue boats arrived and managed to save the majority of those on board. Despite a lengthy investigation into the cause of the fire, no definitive explanation was ever found. What are your thoughts about these massive ship collisions and mistakes that were caught on camera? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section below.